Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishwapad Paramahamsa Parivadikacharya Ashtodarsha Shri Srimati Divine Grace His Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishwapad Paramahamsa Parivadikacharya Ashtodarsha Shri Srimati Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय. All Gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All Gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All Gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtapraye Shabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 5, Chapter 18, entitled The Residents of Jambudvip Offer Prayers, Text 14. Tasmad rajo raga vishada manyo Manas priha भयदैन्यमानौ भयदैन्यधिमूलम् हित्वाग्रहं संश्रिति चक्रवालम् नरसिंहपादं भजता भजता कुतो भयमिति तस्माद्रजो रागविषादमन्यो मानस्पृहा भयदैन्यादिमूलम् हित्वाग्रहं संश्रितिचक्रवालम् नरसिंहपादं भजता कुतो भयमिति तस्माद्रजो रागविषादमन्यो मानस्पृहा भयदैन्यादिमूलम् हित्वाग्रहं संसृतिचक्रवालम् नरसिंहपादं भजता कुतोभ्यमिति भयदैन्यादिमूलम् हित्वाग्रहं संसृतिचक्रवालम् नरसिंहपादं भजता कुतो भयमिति तस्माद्रजो रागविषादमन्यो स्पृहा भयदैन्यादिमूलम् हित्वाग्रहं संसृतिचक्रवालम् नरसिंहपादं भजता कुतो भयमिति. Mataji's from word to word translation. Tasmat, therefore, Rajaha of passion or material desires, Raga attachment for material things, Vishada then disappointment, Manyu anger, Manaspriha the desire to be respectable in society, Bhaya fear, Dainya of poverty, Adhimulam the root cause, Hitva giving up, Graham household life, Samsmriti Chakravalam the cycle of repeated birth and death, Narasimhapadam the lotus feet of Lord Narasimha, Bhajata worship, Akuta Bhayam the shelter of fearlessness, Iti thus. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O demons, give up the so-called happiness of family life and simply take shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Narasimhadev, which are the actual shelter of fearlessness. Entanglement in family life is the root cause of material attachment. Indefatigable desires, moroseness, anger, despair, fear, and the desire for false prestige, all of which result in the repetition of birth and death. There is no purport on this verse. We'll read the next verse 15, translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Shukadeva Goswami continued, in the tract of land called Ketumala Varsha, Lord Vishnu lives in the form of Kamadev, only for the satisfaction of his devotees. These include Lakshmiji, the goddess of fortune, the Prajapati Samvatsara, and all of Samvatsara's sons and daughters. The daughters of Prajapati are considered the controlling deities of the nights, and his sons are considered the controlling deities of the days. The Prajapati's offspring number 36,000, one for each day and each night in the lifetime of a human being. At the end of each year, the Prajapati's daughters become very agitated upon seeing the extremely effulgent disk of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus they all suffer miscarriages. Purport. This Kamadev, who appears as Krishna's son named Pradyumna, is Vishnu Tattva. How this is so is explained by Madhvacharya, who quotes from the Brahmanda Purana. Kamadeva sthitam Vishnum upasate. Although this Kamadev is Vishnu Tattva, his body is not spiritual, but material. Lord Vishnu as Pradyumna or Kamadev accepts a material body, but he still acts spiritually. It does not make any difference whether he accepts a spiritual or a material body. He can act spiritually in any condition of existence. Mayavadi philosophers regard even Lord Krishna's body as material, but their opinions cannot impede the spiritual activity of the Lord. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadatishva Padantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Utabadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishwapadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishwapadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Nitinamine Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktashaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Seeking the blessings of all Vaishnavas assembled, especially Radha Shambhu and senior devotees. So we are reading from Canto 5. This is the topic of Sthanam, and reading on chapter 18 entitled The Residents of Jambudvip Offer Prayers, verse number 14 and 15. So right now we are in the middle of cosmology. We heard from various devotees earlier. Some devotees have presented slideshows on cosmology, and we heard so much detail in terms of the Bhumandal. So apparently it may seem why Parikshit Maharaj is so interested in knowing about the details of Bhumandal. As such, if you see the 5th canto, it is starting with right in the first chapter is about active Priyavrat, right? Another son of Swayambhu Manu, who was interested in performing austerities in the Himalayas, Gandhamadan, whereas he was called back in terms of ruling the administration again. And eventually we see Agnidra, his son, then Nabhi, Rishabdev. Eventually, Rishabdev, there are 3 chapters on Rishabdev, this Bhagavatam. And eventually about Bharat Maharaj, who eventually becomes a deer, and then Jada Bharat. So there are 8 chapters on Bharat Maharaj. And then further descendants of famous personalities mentioned are Gaya and Viraja. And then suddenly now Parikshit Maharaj is like inquiring that I want to know about the details of Bhumandal. Why is he now wanting to know about the details of Bhumandal? So a conditioned soul might feel it seems there is no concern for Parikshit Maharaj to know about the details of Bhumandal. Why is he asking so? So Prabhupada gives a very beautiful clarification. So we'll try to understand that it's like if a patient is going to a doctor, he gets a prescribed medicine. Some patients simply gulp the medicine as it is, but some are more interested in knowing the ingredients. What does this medicine contain? How much proportion, and what are the side effects? Right? Some are more curious about knowing things. So is it just the curiosity that Parikshit Maharaj is expressing, or is it something more? Or if he, just like for example, if there is a rich person, businessman, entrepreneur, he has some farm and he has some factories. So if somebody wants to visit the factory, like sometimes there is a dairy, for example, a school children may get some permission to go and visit the dairy to know how the milk packet is made and how the working is happening. That is more of energy of the person. And somebody who has a relationship with the owner may get an opportunity to be able to visit him at his own house. Somebody visiting the factory is knowing the workings or the energy, like we talk about Shakti and Shaktiman. And somebody who has a relationship with the owner will be more interested in meeting the person because of the relationship. But sometimes a person who has a good relation with the owner may also be interested in knowing the workings of the factory. Oh, I want to see your factory, I want to see how it functions. So person who has a relation with Shaktiman, the energetic, may sometimes be interested in also knowing how does your energy function, to get awed, to get the feeling of that greatness of how things are functioning, to know how great the personality is. So is it for such reason that Parikshit Maharaj is knowing about the curiosity? It's like somebody who is going to Vrindavan, will he inquire about the details of Bombay? What is the Western Railway and Central Railway? How many stations are there? Which is the starting point, which is the ending point? He is going to Vrindavan, but he is inquiring about Bombay. It might seem like this. Parikshit Maharaj is a personality who is going to Golok, but he is inquiring about the details of Bhulok. We are staying in Bhulok, we should be interested in inquiring about Golok. Right? But Parikshit Maharaj is going to Golok, but he is inquiring about details of Bhulok. How this different dvipas are there, how this different varshas are there, and all these details he is interested in knowing. And another reason, another perspective we can see, Parikshit Maharaj is about to leave his body in a matter of maybe 4 or 5 days. If he heard Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days, already 5th canto is going on. In about 4 to 5 days, he is about to leave his body, and he is a personality who has seen Lord Krishna while he was in the womb of his mother. And he happens to be the grandson of the Pandavas. So for such a personality, where is the question of rotting in the material world? He is a sure shot candidate. He is called as Vishnu Rat. He is a personality who is so advanced in spiritual life, sure shot going to spiritual world, Golok Vrindavan. But just leaving his body in 4 or 5 days, but still he is interested in knowing the details of Bhulok. So Prabhupada gives very beautiful clarification in terms of how his inquiry is not at all material. So in verse number 3, 16th chapter and verse number 3, Prabhupada clarifies, saying that although Parikshit Maharaj might not have had Shri Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Maiya ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. So Prabhupada says, although Parikshit Maharaj might not have had any reason to be concerned with detailed information of the universe, he was thinking of it in relationship with Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, such geographical knowledge was not material, but transcendental. Because he was thinking about the details of Bhulok in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is why his inquiry was not at all material, rather it was transcendental. Which goes to show that anything connected with Krishna becomes transcendental. Even if you have an apparent material subject, material body, material circumstances, but if we connect with Krishna, it becomes transcendental. As they say, if food is connected with Krishna, it becomes prasad. If home is connected with Krishna, it becomes temple. Right? Anything connected with Krishna becomes transcendental. And then further Prabhupada explains that even with the lifetime of Brahma, if a person has a qualification of a lifetime of Brahma, still with such long duration, one cannot know even the material expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That means this material world, the expansions. What to speak of? The spiritual world, the spiritual perspectives. And the fact is that material world is only 1/4 of the creation. What is 1/4 of the creation, what is material, is factually almost impossible for the conditioned soul to learn because of the complications. So such detailed, complicated things are there. What to speak of the conditioned soul trying to understand the spiritual subject matters. And Prabhupada very emphatically writes in the purport, that is why one should accept the statements of Shukadeva Goswami, authorities like Shukadeva Goswami, as it is, without having any mental speculation as to what they are speaking about the details of Bhulok. It's like somebody who has visited America, if they return and they describe about what America is like, then it's like an experienced person. Similarly, when scriptures talk, when the great saintly personalities are speaking, they are speaking from realization. And when they speak based on realization about the details, Prabhupada says, we should accept them as it is because it's coming from authorities like Shukadeva Goswami. So basically what we are going through is in terms of the different dvipas. Prabhupada talks about 7 dvipas, beginning with Jambu Dvip, where Bharatvarsha is. And each dvip is connected or is surrounded by an ocean. Then again, next dvip, then again surrounded by the oceans. So Prabhupada mentions about these details, as Jambu Dvip is surrounded by the ocean of salt water, where we are as Bharatvarsha. And then Plaksha Dvip is surrounded by sugarcane juice. Somebody is interested, an entire ocean of sugarcane. And then Salmali Dvip is surrounded by liquor. And then Kula Dvip or Kusha Dvip is surrounded by clarified butter, ocean of clarified butter. Then Krauncha Dvip is surrounded by an ocean of milk. And then Shaka Dvip surrounded by an ocean of yogurt. And then Pushkara Dvip surrounded by an ocean of clear drinking water. So 7 dvips and then surrounded by ocean. So it's, and then of course a lot of dimensions are given in terms of the details, how each place is situated. And within Jambu Dvip, then there are 9 Varshas. We are staying in Bharatvarsha, but other than this Bharatvarsha, there are 8 more Varshas, which in the previous chapters Prabhupada explains, these are like, even these places are almost like heavenly planets, the kind of opulences which is there. Only Bharatvarsha is apparently it may seem it's a mixed mode of happiness and miseries, but at the same time, there is a great glory of Bharatvarsha, because even demigods are inclined, are anxious to take birth in this glorious land of Bharatvarsha. So in one sense, apparently it may seem it's Kali Yuga, it's the worst of the degraded age and all that, but within this, we have such glorious opportunity of being in Bharatvarsha and being at a time when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just appeared 500 years back. So it's a very glorious opportunity and fortunate moments. So about the, within the Jambu Dvip, then Bhagavatam explains, then there are 9 Varshas. In the previous chapter, there was description about Ilavarata Varsha, where Sankarshan is the predominating deity, and Lord Shiva is the worshipper. And then there was prayers of Lord Shiva offering in the previous chapter. In this chapter we see further, which is Bhadrashva Varsha, which is the predominant deity is Hayagriva, and it's being worshipped by Bhadrashrava. And further we saw about now the current, till the last verse, the description was about Hari Varsha, where the predominating deity is Lord Narsimha and the worshipper is Prahlad Maharaj. So that was the 14th verse, that was ending. And 15th verse onwards, now we are talking about Ketumala Varsha. Now the description is going to be described about Ketumala, and here the predominating deity is Kamadev or Pradyumna. And the worshipper is, predominant worshipper is goddess of fortune Lakshmi Devi, and along with Samvatsara Prajapati and his offsprings. So this is a worshipper. Further after this, then there will be description about Ramyaka Varsha, then there is Hiranyamaya Varsha and Uttarakuru Varsha, which will be covered in this chapter. Next chapter there will be Kim Purusha Varsha and Bharat Varsha. So that is how the 9 Varshas will be covered. And we see the predominating deities. So particularly in this verse, we will see 3 aspects here. One is about the temporary control of the living entity, the limited control which the living entity has. Second is in terms of the captivating beauty of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, enchanting beauty of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And third is, in spite of accepting material circumstances, how one can act spiritually. Accept material circumstances, still act on a spiritual platform. So talking about limited control, as Prabhupada explains in the translation and the purport, that the daughters of Prajapati are controllers of the night, and the sons of Prajapati are controllers of the days. And the number of offsprings is mentioned as 36,000, which means 360 days into 100, as 100 years of a living entity. So I was just thinking it might mean that, I mean, logically it may seem one person with for one day and one night. In that sense, some of them probably may not even get their turn to control because the living entity, every living entity does not even live for 100 years. And even if they get to control, they get to control one day or one night. How limited that jurisdiction is. To control only for one day in a lifetime, you're getting an opportunity to control one day or one night. So as such, the living entity has a very limited jurisdiction of control, very insignificant area of control, but still, unfortunately, the living entity gets proud of whatever jurisdiction there is. It's like if a manager can give a task only in the office premises. It's not that he can call in the dead of the night and say, do some work for me. A manager can do it only, he can actually only give office related tasks. He cannot give his personal work, saying, I want to get this done, do some errands for me. No, he has some limited jurisdiction, but yet the conditioned soul gets so proud, whether it is a boss in the office, whether we are head of the family, whether temple commander or any position that one has, the jurisdiction that one has is quite limited in terms of time, place and circumstances, right? Jayadratha at one point of time wanted to defeat the Pandavas. He was like wanted to take revenge because of being insulted, his special haircut. And then when he worships Lord Shiva, so he asks for the blessings, saying that I want to defeat the Pandavas. And Lord Shiva says, that is not possible. But since you have performed so much of tapasya, so much of austerities, what I can grant you is, you can stop them for one day. Just for one particular day. And that day happened to be apparently in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. That was the day when Abhimanyu Abhimanyu entered the Chakravyuha, and then after he entered, apparently when Jayadratha comes, then there was a block. The Pandavas were not able to enter. The plan was that Abhimanyu would be like the needle because he knew how to enter, and the Pandavas would enter like the thread, following him. But the needle entered, but then it was blocked. So Abhimanyu entered, but the Pandavas were not able to. So how is it that Jayadratha could do that? That was because of the blessings of Lord Shiva, because he performed so much of austerity. But what did he get after so much of austerities was 1 day of control. So like this, like even if you see Ashwatthama, 1 day he was like sort of possessed, almost at the fag end of the Kurukshetra war. And then it was as if he was possessed by the Shakti of Lord Shiva. And then at the dead of the night he is killing all the children, sleeping children of the Pandavas, thinking them to be Pandavas. So apparently it's like living entity gets limited control, but the jurisdiction what we have in terms of time, place, circumstance is very limited, is very insignificant. Whereas for the Lord, it's like when Lord Ram raises his eyebrows, even the ocean starts boiling. Although apparently initially the ocean was reluctant, but eventually we see that eventually the ocean gives way for Lord Ram. So as Prabhupada explains, Bhoktaram Egatapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Suhradam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantim Rachati. So the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all the creation, and at the same time he is most supreme controller. Ishvara Parama Krishna. So amongst all the controllers, he is the supreme most controller. So living entity has very limited jurisdiction, whereas Supreme Lord has unlimited control over this entire creation. And then we see Prabhupada writes in the purport about how Kamadev, who appears as Krishna's son, named Pradyumna, is Vishnu Tattva. So Prabhupada in the purport explains that how this is so, although this Kamadev is Vishnu Tattva, his body is not spiritual but material. Lord Vishnu as Pradyumna or Kamadev accepts a material body but he still acts spiritually. Whereas in Krishna book about the chapter of Pradyumna, Prabhupada mentions, this is Kamadev, a demigod of the heavenly planets, especially capable of inducing lusty desires. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna has many grades and of parts and parcels, but the quadruple expansions of Krishna, that is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha, are directly in the Vishnu category. Kama or Cupid demigod, who later on took his birth in the womb of Rukmini, was also named Pradyumna, but he cannot be the Pradyumna of the Vishnu category. He belongs to the category of Jiva Tattva, but for the special power in the category of demigods, he was a part and parcel of the super prowess of Pradyumna. So here Prabhupada mentions his category of Vishnu Tattva, but his body is material. Whereas in Krishna book he mentions about how he is Jiva Tattva, but he is empowered. So it's more like Shakti-Avesh, it's like empowered, whether it's living entity or Vishnu category. So talking about Pradyumna was very enchanting, very enamored. I mean, people who would look at him would get very captivated by his beauty. So much so that even the queens of Dwarka felt bashful upon seeing Pradyumna. So Pradyumna is described as being the son of Rukmini, but there was this demon called Shambarasura who happened to know that as per destiny he is going to be killed by Pradyumna. Just like Kamsa knew, Lord Krishna is the one who is going to be the cause of my death. So Shambarasura knew that Pradyumna is going to be the person who is going to kill me. So when he comes to know about this, he, just like again Kamsa, within 10 days, those children who were born, he made an attempt to kill. So within 10 days of being in the maternity house there, Shambarasura is kidnapping, abducting Pradyumna, Rukmini's son. And after abducting, he basically throws this baby into the ocean, thinking that now he is finished. But Prabhupada says, Rakhe Krishna Mare Krishna Rakhe ke. If Krishna wants to protect, who can kill? And if Krishna wants to kill, who can protect? So although he was thrown in the ocean, eventually after floating, then he was swallowed by a fish, a huge fish. And eventually that fish was sold or taken to the kitchen of very Shambarasura demon. how destiny works, right? So when he was taken to the kitchen, the cook who was cutting the fish, then he found this beautiful baby, and he was like surprised. So then he called the maid servant, who happened to be Mayavati. She was acting as a maid servant there, who happened to be earlier Rati, the wife of Cupid. So she was serving as Mayavati, as a maid servant. Her name was Mayavati. So the cook called Mayavati, this maid servant, saying, what to do? I was cutting the fish, I was going to cook, and here I find a beautiful baby boy. So Mayavati was also wondering what to do, but being a lady, like compassionate, she wanted to nurture. And right at that time, Narad Muni appears and gives a background that this is basically Pradyumna, who is the son of Krishna, but in his previous life, he has been Cupid. So basically Cupid was when he wanted to agitate Lord Shiva, when Lord Shiva with his anger just burnt Kamadev. And Kamadev, it is described that he enters Krishna's body, and then eventually through Rukmini, through the womb of Rukmini, he is appearing as Pradyumna. So Narad Muni gives this background saying that this was your husband in the previous life. You were Rati and he was Kamadev. So naturally she wants to protect, she wants to care, nurture. And it is described that within short time, the baby grows into a youthful young boy and eventually a young man. Very short time. So, and after that, there was a little change in the feelings. Like how a mother feels towards the child is nothing but affection. But what a wife would feel for the husband, that is, there is a what do you call, madhurya ras, whatever, right? So what a mother feels for the child is affection, right? It's pure. But now Mayavati, who has raised Pradyumna, suddenly started experiencing conjugal feelings. And Pradyumna is asking, how is this change? And that is not expected from a mother. So then she explains that Narad Muni had appeared and he explained about the background, and basically we were together. And then eventually she empowers, she also knew a lot of mystic powers, she empowered him also, and with a lot of mystic powers that he had, he could easily defeat Shambharasura. His head was cut, and then Mayavati took him in the airways to Dwarka. Immediately they were transported, and they went directly to the Antapur of the palace, Lord Krishna's palace, where all the queens were there. So when they arrived, right in the middle where the queens were there, they all felt very bashful, as if Lord Krishna has returned. Because he, even in terms of appearance, he was very similar, and in terms of enchanting, in terms of the charming personality, that was also very emphatic. So they felt very bashful and returned. So Shukadeva Goswami explains that even Mayavati feels bashful or conjugal feelings for Pradyumna, and similarly even the queens of Dwarka feel bashful on seeing Pradyumna's beautiful body. So it's very captivating. The body is very captivating. Like we see how Lord Naranarayan, from his thighs, Urvashi is produced and then given as a gift when Kamadev wanted to agitate or on the orders of Indra, when they wanted to disturb the tapasya of Naranarayan Rishi. He could just produce Urvashi, who was so enchanting for Indra. Indra, on one hand, he felt awkward that he made such an attempt to disturb his own master. But then eventually he was happy that he got Urvashi. At least I got some return gift. He was happy with that. But we see that, somebody who can produce a personality who in turn further can enchant, entice the entire world, universe, how beautiful that personality would be. That's why, like when Vishwaroop appears, that is Lord Nityananda Prabhupada explains, it's not different than Lord Nityananda, or even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself as beautiful Nimai. It's like, it is described when that Brahman, that high Brahman who appears, who comes in the house of Jagannath Mishra. So when Jagannath Mishra says, please, it will be our great fortune if you cook in our house. And he agrees, and he says that basically I keep traveling everywhere, and usually I eat roots and fruits, but sometimes I get an opportunity to cook at different houses, and that's when I accept grains. Otherwise, I am happy with just roots and fruits. So he started, for your pleasure, we'll start cooking. But after the cooking, then when he's about to offer, then child Nimai comes in and accepts the offering. And then this Brahman shouts, "Hi, hi!" And then he says, "This child has spoiled my offering." And then Jagannath Mishra comes out, he's very angry, he's looking at this boy, but he's about to beat him, and this Brahman says, "No, just leave him. He's a child. He doesn't understand what is right and what is wrong. How will you benefit by beating him?" And then he says, "Just give me some fruits and roots. I'll be happy." But then this Brahman, Jagannath Mishra says, "It will be a great misfortune for us if you have come to our house, and if you don't cook, and if you remain apparently hungry, it will be a great sin on us." So then he requests, "Please." And then eventually, after some cajoling, eventually the Brahman agrees. Says, "It's almost the dead of the night, but anyways, just to please you, I will do the cooking again." Second time again he does. And this time Nimai was taken to the neighboring ladies. And then they had this beautiful discussion. "Why do you eat from this Brahman? Do you know his caste?" And Nimai says, "Well, I like to eat from Brahmanas. And anyways, how does eating from them spoil my caste?" So eventually, being with the ladies, and meanwhile, when this Brahman started offering, somehow or other, by the mystic potency, again Nimai escaped and takes the offering second time. Then again this Brahman starts shouting, "Hi, hi!" And he is so disturbed. What is this? Again second time he has spoiled the offering. Jagannath Mishra gets wild, starts taking a stick, and is determined to just beat him. And again this Brahman says, "What will you benefit by beating this child? He doesn't even understand." And that is the time when Vishwarup comes. When the third time when they're pleading, when Vishwarup also comes and says, "Please, if you cook, it will be a great fortune for us. In fact, if you do not, a great misfortune is going to befall on us." So when this Brahman looks at Vishwarup, he asks, "Who is this? Who is the fortunate parents who have begotten such a beautiful child?" Just by looking at him, he was like enamored, he was like enchanted. And then eventually he agrees to cook. Similarly, we see about even Vishwarup. Vishwarup is Vishwambar, when he used to go to call Vishwarup, Sachi Mata would say, "Go and call Vishwarup, your brother." And whereas Vishwarup would be usually at the house of Advaita Acharya, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing Krishna Katha. And when they would be discussing Krishna Katha at the house of Advaita Acharya, and Vishwambar, Nimai, when he would come, he would notice that they are talking about me. They are talking about the glorious activities of Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he would come, and then when Vishwambar enters Nimai, everybody would be so enamored and enchanted looking at his beauty. None of them were aware why we are so captivated just by looking at him, because by this time he had not declared, it was not known that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead for others, but unknowingly they were just captivated. So that is a beautiful quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, having a captivating nature. And that's why when we come in front of the Lordships, we can offer our prayers to get attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who by nature, who in fact, from a qualitative perspective, is called all attractive. How unfortunate it is that somebody who is all attractive does not appear to be attractive in our conditioned stage. Right? So that way, if you offer our prayers, by default he is all attractive. What we can pray is to remove whatever coverings are there, to remove the rust or the dust which is covering the mirror, so that we can revive our lost attraction towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as Prabhupada says, that his body is material, but yet he acts spiritual. So that is no wonder for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Prabhupada used to give this famous example of the iron rod. When the iron rod is kept in fire, it acts like fire. Similarly, about association, Prabhupada would say that if one gets good association, then one gets saintly qualities. So it's very natural that where we put ourselves in what association we put ourselves in, we are able to acquire those qualities. So although apparently material, but one can still act spiritually. So Prabhupada gives example of Pradyumna here. So I wanted to discuss about Srila Prabhupada acting so very spiritually in an apparent material circumstance. So today happens to be the 55th anniversary of the Mantra Rock Dance. 29th January 1967. So this is the day when the Mantra Rock Dance was arranged. So we can see what was the circumstance and what Prabhupada transformed it to. So this was the first time when Srila Prabhupada takes a flight, because even while going from India to America, it was cargo ship, Jaladut. So this is the first time that from New York, other than New York, this was the next center which was about like opening up, this newly coming up, San Francisco. So Prabhupada is coming from New York to San Francisco, first time in the flight, and he expresses his beautiful realizations. One is about how from the top, all this huge skyscraper buildings looks like matchboxes. And the other is about beyond the clouds, still there is sunshine. When we are below the clouds, it's the sunshine is blocked, but above the clouds, we can see the clear sunshine. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu said, he noticed that he could make out that Prabhupada is coming for the first time. So when somebody sees a car for the first time or goes in the flight for the first time, we get a little excited. When you go regularly, then you are used to it. And so Prabhupada expressed this. So the devotees in New York were actually reluctant for Prabhupada to come for this event. Why? Because this event is arranged, there is going to be a lot of passion here. It's a very passionate act. It's like, for us to understand a little bit, what we can say is it's like a discotheque, a place where the young boys and girls are going to dance. So those places are usually not very lighted by nature. They try to keep it very dark, and then they may add some strobe lights, like on and off, on and off, on and off they'll go, and then colorful lights and literally mirrors all across. So all that passionate atmosphere is there. So all these disciples from New York, they were reluctant that Prabhupada should not go to this place because there is going to be pounding drums. There will be heavy drums will be used, and there will be drugged hippies. First of all, they are hippies, and on the top of that, they will be drugged. They will already be on LSDs, on drugs. So in such an atmosphere, if you go, it will, how would you preach in such an atmosphere? So Shyam Sundar Prabhu by this time already had made arrangements. So from New York, as if Prabhupada was, he was trying to side with them, saying, let's see whether it is an opportunity for preaching. But when he comes to San Francisco, they have already made so much arrangements that Prabhupada did not want to disturb that. And he also definitely saw it as an opportunity. Let us see in terms of the preaching part opportunity. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu had made a lot of arrangements. He had called the famous personalities. There was this groups or people, this Grateful Dead, very unique names. And then there was this Moby Grape, and then Big Brother, and then Timothy Leary, and of course there was Allen Ginsberg. He was also a very famous personality, and he had influence over people. So he had just 2-3 days before itself in Golden Gate Park, he had also helped to organize some events, and he had preached about the Hare Krishna Mahamantra as well. So when Shyam Sundar Prabhu has made so much arrangements, Hayagiri Prabhu comes and says, Swamiji says even Ravi Shankar is Maya. This is just to give a reference, not to undermine a person, but to give a reference of, which means even apparently even a classical or something which is apparently pious, but from the standards of spirituality says this is Maya. Now if you say that is Maya, what would we say? Timothy Leary and Moby Grape and Grateful Dead, and which will be basically rock dance, mantra rock dance. That was the event named at Avalon Ballroom. But so Shyam Sundar Prabhu says, I have already made so many arrangements, and we are going ahead. So then there is this grand entry. Of course, by 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., all the tickets are sold. It's an amazing event. Like all these devotees, they say, Shyam Sundar Prabhu says that, we knew Krishna is going to work out some magic because Prabhupada is involved, because Prabhupada, as a pure devotee, he will do everything for him. And by 8 o'clock, the tickets were sold. By about 10 o'clock, 10 p.m., Prabhupada makes an entry on the stage. When Prabhupada enters, there is a grand, they blow the conch shell, like we have Govinda Madhipurusha. So they blow the conch shell. So it was a very grand event. All these famous musicians are called, bands are called, they are there on the stage. And when Prabhupada enters, there was this huge, they blow the conch shell, and like everybody is waiting for him. And then Prabhupada speaks about the holy names. So he says that you can, these holy names will lead one to the spiritual world. Although it has come from India, from the Vedas, but it will lead one to the spiritual world. You can chant tonight or any time. Like that Prabhupada says. Shyam Sundar Prabhu was very relieved at the end of the lecture. He says that I felt if Prabhupada would have spoken about the rules and regulations, half the people would have gone out, walked out of the place. But Prabhupada only said, you can chant tonight or any other time. And then of course, eventually, Prabhupada had a kirtan for 1 hour. And it was at that point where Shyam Sundar Prabhu explained, this is the first time we saw Srila Prabhupada dancing. He stood up, lifted his arms, and started dancing. The famous Swami step, which we may do it on a daily basis. Right? It's difficult to describe that, but we all know what is a Swami step. Right? So that was the first time Shyam Sundar Prabhu says we witnessed Srila Prabhupada dancing there. And it was so jubilant. Kirtanan Swami and Ranchod Prabhu were accompanying Swamiji Prabhupada, and he was a little conscious and anxious that Prabhupada was perspiring. It was a big event, and as per his age, Kirtanan Maharaj was also disturbed in terms of how Prabhupada would feel. But at the end, Prabhupada, while leaving, he says, this is no place for a brahmachari. And then he leaves. So this marks the 55th anniversary of that mantra rock dance at the Avalon Ballroom. So this is an example of how Srila Prabhupada converted apparently transformed and apparently material circumstance and such a passionate atmosphere into so very spiritual. So apparently the body's material circumstances may be material, but one always has the choice to act spiritually. So that's what we could see from this. The living entity has a limited control, jurisdiction as per time, place, circumstances, and how the Supreme Lord is captivating and enchanting by his beautiful features, and how even if circumstances are material, but we still have the choice to act spiritually. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Any comments or any questions? Avalon Ballroom. Mantra rock dance. Yeah. Actually, I was reading that and I happened to see the date was 29 January. So, Shyam Sundar Prabhu writes in the Chasing the Rhinos, and he says, this was my first opportunity to chase a rhino for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada.